are here to discuss the roadblocks in the struggle for just and lasting peace, and it is my great pleasure to moderate this panel. Again, for our reflections and questions, please write them down, jot them down in your heads, because after this panel, there will be another panel, but after that, there will be the plenary discussion where we will be raising our questions and, more importantly, sharing our reflections on what we have heard throughout the rest of this day. So, to explain what these roadblocks to the struggle of just and lasting peace, we have three speakers for the day, for this panel, and may we call on our speakers. May I call on Ms. Cacolina Ledesma, Mervin Tuquero, and Sister Emma on the stage, please. To explain what these challenges and what these roadblocks to the struggle for just and lasting peace. First, we will hear from Cacolina Ledesma, who will share with us the framework of the peace negotiations. Cacolina Ledesma, a political activist since the early 1970s, was politicalized by the oppression of the sugar workers of Negros. She is now a member of the National Democratic Front of the Philippines negotiating panel in the peace talks with the government of the Republic of the Philippines. She is also involved in women's work, especially in the International Women's Alliance, or IWA, and she is the beautiful widow of Ka Ruby. Ladies and gentlemen, Cacolina Ledesma.
Good afternoon, dear comrades and dear friends. It's very inspiring to be here and to see that so many of you come from different places all over the world. So it's really congratulations to the International Coalition for Human Rights in the Philippines, ICHR, and the Ecumenical Voice for Peace and Human Rights in the Philippines, EcuVoice, for organizing this very timely Pagtatanim conference. I have been asked to speak on the NDF's vision for a just and lasting peace. A just and lasting peace. You'll hear that phrase very often these days. It's like the new phrase, the in word. Even Trump calls for a just and lasting peace. Does he even know what that means? What does a just and lasting peace mean in reality? First of all, a just and lasting peace does not mean the silencing of the guns. Even if the guns are silenced, but the same structures and systems that brought about the armed conflict remain, there cannot be peace. Those who took up arms will take them up again. The peace will not be just and lasting. For the NDF, a just and lasting peace is stated in the Hague Joint Declaration. This was the first peace document signed by the NDF with the Government of the Republic of the Philippines, the GRP, in 1992. It is a short and simple document, but it gives the framework or the roadmap, that's another popular term these days, of our vision for a just and lasting peace. The document starts by saying that the purpose of peace negotiations is to resolve the armed conflict, that the goal is the attainment of a just and lasting peace. The Hague Joint Declaration continues, the holding of peace negotiations must be in accordance with mutually acceptable principles, including national sovereignty, democracy, and social justice, and no precondition shall be made to negate the inherent character and purpose of peace negotiations. This last phrase means no surrender or no pressure to surrender, because that is not the purpose and character of peace negotiations. The Hague Joint Declaration concludes with the 4-point agenda for peace talks, human rights and international humanitarian law, socio-economic reforms, political and constitutional reforms, and end of hostilities and disposition of forces. The NDFP and GRP have already finished discussing the first agenda point. The result was the signing of the Comprehensive Agreement on Respect for Human Rights and International Humanitarian Law, or more popularly known as the CARIL. We signed the agreement in 1998. On human rights, the document says, "This agreement seeks to confront, remedy, and prevent the most serious human rights violations in terms of civil and political rights, as well as to uphold, protect, and promote the full scope of human rights and fundamental freedoms." On the section on international humanitarian law, it states, "In the exercise of their inherent rights, the parties to the armed conflict shall adhere to and be bound by the generally accepted principles and standards of international humanitarian law." The CARIL is not a document of motherhood statements, but based on the concrete realities in the Philippines. The section on international humanitarian law follows the rules of war of the Geneva Conventions. Unfortunately, as we all know, this agreement is not being followed at all by the other side. The next agenda item, which we have been discussing since 1998, is on social economic reforms. With the signing of the CARIL, both parties exchanged draft documents of the socio-economic reforms. 1998, that is a record of 27 years discussing socio-economic reforms. Why so long? Because we are discussing the roots of the armed conflict, the roots why we do not have peace. And the GRP has used every occasion to stop, to terminate, to suspend, to terminate, to stop, anything so that the process does not move forward. On their part, we in the NDF have even published a book on our proposed agenda for socio-economic reforms. Among the topics that the NDF would like to discuss are economic sovereignty and national patrimony, agrarian reform and agricultural development, national industrialization and economic development, economic planning, the rights of the working people, livelihood and social services, environmental protection, rehabilitation and compensation, and foreign economic and trade relations. These are just some of the topics that are supposed to be discussed. From the proposed topics, you can easily understand why the GRP finds it really hard to discuss these topics. Both panels have spent many years working on this document. It has taken so long because, as I said, there have been suspensions, changes of presidents, delays, etc. In a way, it is the unspoken thing, but they don't want to talk about and agree to the resolution of the armed conflict. They want to keep the situation as it is, with they in power and they continue to oppressing the people. Talks were going on well during the first year of Duterte's administration. As a matter of fact, just before Duterte terminated the peace talks in 2017, both sides agreed to the free distribution of land to the peasants. And then Duterte terminated the talks and put the NDF on the terrorist list. The third agenda point's political and constitutional reforms is a logical agenda point. Agreements made for socio-economic reforms will need political and constitutional changes. When the roots of the armed conflict have been addressed, then there can be an end of hostilities and disposition of forces. The GRP always wants to discuss the fourth point first. They want the NDF to lay down the arms and then talk. With the present situation in the Philippines, until the roots of the armed conflict are addressed, there will never be peace. What will continue will be the bombings in the countryside, the EJ case, the red tagging, arrest of NDF consultants, terrorist labeling, etc. The GRP generals do not want peace. They want to win the war militarily. That is why they want the laying down of arms. But laying down of arms is not peace. Not hearing the explosion of the guns is not peace. Peace, a just and lasting peace, is when the Philippines is free from the control of imperialism, when there is real democracy and justice, when there is food for everyone, land for the landless, jobs, health care, education for everyone, and decent housing for all. Then we can say, yes, there is peace. To attain a just and lasting peace is a long and difficult struggle. But it is a struggle we have to wage if we want to be truly free. Thank you. And I would like to take this occasion to give this replica of the painting of Picasso on peace. I want to give it to iChirp and to EcuVoice to thank them for their struggle to help us all have a just and lasting peace.
Thank you very much, Connie. It is always interesting to monitor how these peace talks develop and if these peace talks actually contribute to what you have just defined as a just and lasting peace. Indeed, the peace process is a long and arduous deal that we all have to pay attention to if we are all committed to achieving a just and lasting peace for the Filipino people and for the whole world. And up next, as part of the roadblocks to these challenges, to this struggle for the road for a just and lasting peace, we have our next speaker, Mr. Mervin Sol H. Toquero, who is the Deputy General Secretary of the National Council of Churches in the Philippines. Mervin is the co-head of the delegation of the Philippine UPR Watch. He is also the program director of the NCCP program Unit on Faith, Witness and Service, which leads the Council in Human Rights, Humanitarian Response, Migration, and Climate Justice concerns, especially on the role of faith-based organization in social justice. Mervin is the interim coordinator of the EcuVoice, which is one of the conveners or organizers of this conference. Mervin will tell us about the Rabid Red Tagger, that is the National Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict, or the NTF-LCAC, which we have heard already from our former speakers, and also about the Anti-Terror Act and the designation of the NDF by the Anti-Terror Council. Mervin, you have the floor.
Maraming salamat and good afternoon to everyone. Next slide, please. Former President Rodrigo Duterte terminated the peace negotiations between the Government of the Republic of the Philippines, or GRP, and the National Democratic Front of the Philippines in 2017. He issued Executive Order, next slide please, number 70, institutionalizing the whole of nation approach, which mobilizes all government agencies and resources with its goal to end the armed conflict with the NDFP and the Communist Party of the Philippines New People's Army, or CPP-NPA. He then created the National Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict, or the notorious NTF-ELCAC. Next slide, please. The government then launched an all-out war against the NDFP. This approach led to a rise in armed confrontation, and Duterte's campaign to end insurgency does not seem to distinguish between combatants and civilians, and state agents continue to be implicated in extrajudicial killings, enforced disappearances, torture, and illegal arrests and detention. Next slide, please. In 2020, the Anti-Terrorism Act was passed into a law. In 2021, the Anti-Terrorism Council declared the NDFP as a terrorist organization. Terrorist labeling or red tagging by the NTF-ELCAC of known critics such as progressive civil society organizations, churches, and activists that are serving and working with the poorest of the poor has become more threatening. Violations of human rights and international humanitarian law are tangible results of this practice, and so is the shrinking civic space. Duterte's successor, next slide please, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. became the first post-EDSA president who did not engage in peace negotiations with the NDFP at the start of his presidential term. He continued his predecessor's whole-of-nation approach and the NTF-ELCAC. Under his administration, the use of such laws as the Anti-Terrorism Act and the Terrorism Financing and Suppression Law against CSOs intensified. Following the terrorist designation of the CPP-NPA and NDFP, along with their underground organizations, organs, units, and alleged members, several CSOs accused of being fronts for the CPP-NPA and NDFP have become targets. CSOs have also become targets of financial surveillance, asset freezes, and indefinite asset preservation orders, applied to their bank accounts, funds, and properties. However, almost 1.5 years ago, next slide please, on November 23, 2023, a joint statement on a common vision for peace was signed by representatives of the GRP and the NDFP. The joint statement, signed in Oslo, Norway, and facilitated by the Royal Norwegian government, stated that the two parties agreed to work for a principled and peaceful resolution of the armed conflict. The statement acknowledged deep-rooted socio-economic and political grievances and agreed to come up, and I quote, with a framework that sets the priorities for the peace negotiation with the aim of achieving the relevant socio-economic and political reforms towards a just and lasting peace. The joint statement was welcomed by human rights and peace advocates as a positive step towards a just and lasting peace in the country. However, as the months progressed, it seems that the prospects for peace as a result of that joint statement have dimmed. Red tagging and the violence that came with it continued. The NTF-ELCAC continues its practice of red tagging even after the ruling of the Supreme Court regarding such practice as a threat to people's lives. Next slide, please. No, please. According to Karapatan, there are 3 million cases of red tagging under President Marcos. More serious forms of HR violations result from red tagging. Karapatan documented 124 extrajudicial killings. This is more current rather than the figures mentioned this morning. There are 124 extrajudicial killings and 18 cases of enforced disappearances. These figures do not include those killed under the drug war, which continues to this day. Meanwhile, there are 724 political prisoners in the country, including NDFP consultants, or peace consultants rather, that are supposedly immune from arrests because of the peace negotiations. Next slide, please. According to Karapatan, there have been at least 166 individuals arbitrarily designated and charged under the said laws, the anti-terrorism law and the terrorism financing and suppression law, while 45 are in prison. The terrorism financing and suppression law has been used to freeze the assets of 20 NGOs, including church ministries and formations like the Rural Missionaries of the Philippines, which Sister will delve on later, and Haran Center of the United Church of Christ in the Philippines, and the funds of the UCCP Fatima, a local church also of the UCCP. According to a recent study by the National Union of People's Lawyers and the Council for People's Development and Governance, there were 14 terrorism financing cases in 2023, but this ballooned to 66 in 2024. So there's really an uptick. Last week, we learned that the Rural Missionaries of the Philippines lost the civil forfeiture case against them. Yesterday, we were informed that a warrant of arrest for terrorist financing has been issued for Reverend Julius Neri Camanong, former District Superintendent of the United Methodist Church in Zamboanga Peninsula, and Reverend Joel Ordeniza, the UMC administrative pastor in CA Town, also in Zamboanga, and their driver of the rented car, Romeo Rosell. Just a few minutes ago, we found out that Ipe, or Felipe Levi Hele, a development worker affiliated with Paghidaet Kauswagan Development Group, was arrested last June 24, also for terrorist financing. So, next slide please. Oh, sorry. I forgot. Oh, that's Reverend Julius Camanong, the third person from the right, or second person from the left. And next slide please. That's Ipe of PDG. And then next slide please. Despite calls to abolish the NTFL clock, including recommendations by Ms. Irene Khan, the UN Special Rapporteur for Freedom of Opinion and Expression, she's the one wearing the jacket with flowers next to Charm. And Mr. Ian Fry, the former UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in the context of climate change. President Marcos Jr. not only refused to dissolve NTF-ELCAC, but has even tasked it to lead the implementation of a national action plan for unity, peace, and development for the next 3 years. So, this is sure to further constrict democratic space, exacerbate repression, especially in already militarized areas. Next slide, please. According to Michael Hart, the editorial and social media coordinator of the Pacific Review Journal at the University of Warwick, the approach of President Marcos Jr.'s government can be viewed as a dual-track process. The government, quote, the government engages in peace talks with the NDFP at the national level, while the NTF-ELCAC and the military continue to degrade the insurgency on the ground, as that would inevitably weaken the rebels' negotiating position, which is, not very welcoming in terms of peace negotiations. Despite these setbacks, human rights and peace advocates must support and encourage the GRP and the NTFP to resume the formal peace negotiations. The peace negotiations should not be premised on the surrender of either parties, as Bishop Alminasa has later stated, but work to identify and address the roots of the armed conflict in order to conclusively resolve it. The key to a successful peace process is the role of a strong peace constituency, both national and international. This peace constituency should always push for the resolution of the armed conflict based on social justice. It must tirelessly advocate for the two sides to persist with the peace negotiations on the basis of mutually agreed upon principles until a final negotiated peace settlement is arrived at. A strong and vibrant peace constituency can urge the two parties to overcome obstacles and stay the course, generate public opinion, conducive to positive outcomes and the final negotiated settlement, and help ensure that bilateral agreements are adhered to. Next slide, please. Together, let us call for the resumption of the GRP and NTFP peace negotiations to address the roots of the armed conflict. Let us join the call of the UN Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Opinion and Expression to abolish the National Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict. Let us call for the repeal of the Anti-Terrorism Law and Anti-Terrorism Suppression Law and Financing Law, and free all political prisoners, especially the peace consultants of the National Democratic Front of the Philippines. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Mervin. Thank you for laying down what we need to do and to unite together as our calls, as our actions, as participants to this conference, in order that we shall overcome all these roadblocks or challenges to attain a just and lasting peace. And now, for our third speaker, since we have heard about the case of the rural missionaries of the Philippines, no one else can speak more about the case but Sister Emma Teresita Cupin from the Missionary Sisters of Mary, who is part of the Rural Missionaries of the Philippines, that is one, if not the first organization to have been charged under the Financing Terrorism and Suppression Act of the Philippines. Sister Emma, the floor is yours.
A pleasant afternoon to all of us at magandang hapon sa ating lahat. So, I am a political refugee in Switzerland. I belong to the Missionary Sisters of Mary from Mindanao, particularly Butuan City. And I am also a member of the Rural Missionaries of the Philippines. When we say RMP, that is Rural Missionaries of the Philippines, is a national organization of women and men, religious, priests, and lay people. It is inter-congregational and inter-diocesan in character. Members live and work with the rural poor, farmers, fisherfolks, and indigenous people. Founded on August 15, 1969. RMP is one of the mission partners of the Association of Major Religious Superiors in the Philippines, now called Conference of Major Superiors in the Philippines. For our vision, we envision a community of Christ disciples living as credible witnesses of God's mercy and compassion, living joyfully and authentically, enjoying the fruits of their labor, participating in the decision-making, owning the land detail, and preserving the integrity of creation towards the attainment of justice, peace, and fullness of life. Our mission: we commit ourselves to servant leadership with the rural poor, farmers, agricultural workers, indigenous people, and fisher folks. Through our collective witnessing and prophetic action, encourage and motivate people of goodwill in support of the rural poor, for them to enjoy the fruits of their labor and fullness of life and preserve the integrity of creation. RMP has a program, an education training of farmers in sustainable agriculture, an organic method for increased agricultural production, formation and education of climate change mitigation, disaster risk reduction, and human rights defense. We have also health services and rural schools. And where are we now? Our national office is in Metro Manila, and we have sub-regions in Southern Luzon, Northern and Central Luzon. And in Visayas, in Eastern, Central, and Western Visayas regions. And in Mindanao, Western and Northern and Southern Mindanao region. On red tagging and judicial harassment against RMP, NMR sub-region and its officers and staff. A religious and non-political civil society organizations working for the interest of the rural poor was not spared from red tagging. These are the people being red tagged by our government. Next slide. Yeah, this is also the organizations. And these are the names of the people, including attorneys. And bishops and many other people. Bishop Ablon is there. And those are the posters in the different areas of the Philippines. Oh, these are the terrorist people, organizations. And we are companions, according to them, we are companions of the NPA and others. Not long after the series of public vilification against RMP and RMP-NMR, a case for civil forfeiture was filed against it. This after their respective bank accounts were unilaterally frozen by the Anti-Money Laundering Council. The AMLA in the case number 20-00337 is a case of civil forfeiture that was filed by the Republic of the Philippines, represented by the Anti-Money Laundering Council against the RMP and the Rural Missionaries of the Philippines, Northern Mindanao region, which case is now pending before the Regional Trial Court in Manila, Philippines. The case is mainly grounded on the judicial affidavit of the one Gliceria Balangyao, who alleged that RMP and RMP-NMR financing terrorism by channeling funds to the Communist Party of the Philippines and the New People's Army. The funds channeled allegedly come from the projects that are granted to the organization by financial entities such as European Union, In one of the allegations, Balangyaw mentioned Sister Mary Jane, along with many others who facilitated and financing. It is worth mentioning that as an implication of these allegations, the delegation of the European Union in the Philippines conducted a full audit in its project with RMP and has found nothing to support such allegation. It is unwavering commitment to serve the interest of the rural poor that RMP earned the ear of the Duterte or administration on the baseless assumption of that RMP and the RMP NMR support the New People's Army and the Communist Party of the Philippines through its project and activities like the Healing Heart Project in Northern Mindanao. Hence, the government since the previous Duterte administration and the continuing Marcos administration filed a case of civil forfeiture on the allegation of financing terrorism, despite being ridiculously far-fetched a form of judicial harassment and a strategic lawsuit against public participation. In January 2022 to August 2022, government files complaint against RMP, complaint certified and filed in the court. In 2021, the attacks against RMP moved to the Court of Public Opinion, led by Sunshine Media Network International, SMNI, and the NTF-ELCAC. The government continued to allege through YouTube videos and other media that RMP funneled 60% of its fund granting to the CPP-NPA for their various activities. On January 7, 2022, the AMLA filed complaint to the Department of Justice against several people involved with RMP NMR for violation of the Section 8 of Republic Act 1016-8 as amended. The DOJ released a subpoena related to the complaint on March 16, 2022. On August 15, the DOJ filed charges against 16 individuals, including me and 3 other nuns, for violation of the mentioned law in the Regional Trial Court in Iligan City. The case of financing terrorism is a continuation of an ongoing red tagging and that has occurred to the members of the staff of the RMP NMR that started in the Duterte administration and continues in the Marcos administration. The cases of civil forfeiture and the criminal cases of financing terrorism has severely affected the existence of RMP and RMP NMR as organizations, the life and liberty of its members and staff, and most importantly, the rural poor communities that it vows to serve, so that we remain steadfast in overcoming these judicial struggles against our existence, as we believe that we are on the side of the truth, we are on the side of the Filipino people, and we are on the side of the real church as we proclaim, all for the love that is real and active. Thank you and good afternoon.
All for the love that is real and active. Rural Missionaries of the Philippines, ladies and gentlemen. Indeed, as a case of first instance, the resolution of the cases against RMP, NMR, and the individuals for financing terrorism is a significant battle for truth, which could affect all other similar cases that were filed against other human rights and humanitarian organizations and individuals. But more importantly, outside the legal cases, these judicial harassments affect the peasant communities that have been deprived of social services by the Philippine government, so that all the more reason that these unfounded charges must be dropped. Thank you very much, Sister Emma.